Emma Patterson had never heard the world in its truest sense. Born deaf, she had lived in a world without sound for 32 years. Life had always been quiet, peaceful, and, until recently, predictable. But that was before her visit to a cutting-edge hearing clinic, where she was offered a new device, the Olotech Echo, a high-end hearing aid designed for people with profound hearing loss. The clinic assured her that this was more than a hearing aid. It was a revolution. The day Emma tried it for the first time, everything changed. At first, the world sounded alien. There was the hum of distant machinery, the soft rustling of leaves in the wind, the jarring clink of a spoon against a mug. But the most striking thing about the experience was the clarity of sound. It wasn't like hearing as she imagined it, but it was as if she could feel the sounds, like vibrations that thrummed through her body. It was overwhelming. She couldn't take the device off. Emma was addicted to the sensation of sound, even the mundane ones. However, something wasn't right. Every now and then, she could hear faint whispers, so soft she couldn't pinpoint their origin. At first, she dismissed them as artifacts from the new technology. After all, her brain was still adjusting to the flood of information. But the whispers grew louder and more distinct. The whispers began at night. Emma would lie in bed, the room shrouded in darkness, the soft hum of the city outside her window filling the silence. And then, just as she was drifting off, she'd hear it. A soft voice, distant yet clear, calling her name. Emma. Emma. She would sit up, heart racing, only to find that there was no one there. Her phone remained silent, her apartment empty. The sound wasn't coming from anywhere in the room. It was like it was inside her head. The voice grew more insistent, and sometimes she could hear it speaking in broken sentences, as though it were trying to tell her something important. But every time she reached for her phone or turned on the lights, the voice would stop, as if it were hiding. The next day, she returned to the clinic, hoping for an explanation. Dr. Helen Marks, the specialist who had fitted her with the device, was concerned, but reassured her. Sometimes, with new technology, your brain can experience what we call auditory hallucinations. It's not uncommon. Just a side effect of adjusting to the input. Give it a few days. But Emma's symptoms only worsened. The whispers grew louder, clearer. They started coming during the day too. While she was working, sitting in the quiet office of her graphic design job, the voice would return, as though someone were standing just behind her, breathing heavily. Emma, we know what you did. She spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. As Emma's obsession with the whispers grew, she started experimenting with the hearing aid. She adjusted the settings, hoping to isolate the source of the strange sounds. The clinic had told her the device was designed to enhance only certain frequencies of sound, but Emma noticed something odd. When she fine-tuned the frequency range, the whispers stopped, and then started up again, but now, they weren't whispers at all. They were screams. The sound was agonizing, as if the voice were in pain. Emma quickly turned off the device, shaking in fear. But it wasn't just the voices. The sounds had become more chaotic. There were rapid clicks, like the sound of something tapping on the other side of the wall. A high-pitched ringing that she could feel deep in her chest. And then, there was a new sound, one she couldn't ignore. It was a low, guttural growl. Almost mechanical, but not quite. It vibrated in her skull. She could feel it. It was as if the device was no longer amplifying the world around her, but instead, allowing something else into her mind. Something alive. Desperate to understand, Emma returned to the clinic. Dr. Marks was away, and the technician who greeted her seemed uneasy when she explained the situation. "Are you sure you're experiencing these sounds with the device on?" he asked, his voice tight. "Of course," Emma replied, showing him the settings on the Olotech Echo. The technician looked at the device for a long moment before shaking his head. "I'm afraid there's something you don't know, Emma." He led her to a back room, where there was a stack of old files. After sifting through them, he pulled out one thick folder labeled Project Echo Test Subjects. Emma's heart raced as she leafed through the pages, reading about the experimental phase of the Olotech Echo, which had been tested on a small group of deaf individuals. The files mentioned several strange side effects: auditory hallucinations, intense emotional responses, sensory overload. But the most disturbing note was in bold letters on the last page. There is something in the frequency spectrum we cannot account for. Do not attempt to adjust frequencies without supervision. Emma's mind spun. She had unknowingly been part of an experiment, and it wasn't just her brain adjusting to the sounds. Something else was in those frequencies. Something that had been hiding, waiting to be heard. That night, Emma locked herself in her apartment. She disabled the Holotech echo, but the voices didn't stop. They were in her head now. Faint at first, but growing louder by the minute. Emma, you shouldn't have listened. A sudden realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She wasn't just hearing voices. She was hearing something that had been hidden for years. An entity. Something that had been trapped in the frequencies of sound for decades, and it had been awakened by the echo device. The growling sound returned, louder now, accompanied by a strange static noise. It was as if the world around her had shifted. Her vision blurred, her skin crawled with cold. The sound grew louder, like 1,000 voices screaming in agony. Now, you'll never silence us again. The device began to hum uncontrollably, the sound distorting. Emma frantically pulled it off, but it was too late. She couldn't stop the sound from coming. The voices were inside her now, deep in her mind, and they weren't going anywhere. Daniel Whitmore was an ordinary man, 34 years old, worked as a systems analyst at a mid-sized firm in Chicago, lived alone in a small but clean apartment on the 6th floor of a modest building downtown. Quiet, predictable, structured. That's why what happened next unraveled him so quickly. It began on a Wednesday. Daniel returned home from work around 6:15 p.m., like he always did. He hung his coat, removed his shoes, and reached for the remote. That's when he noticed it. The TV was already on. Static. A low humming noise filled the room, though he was sure he had turned it off before leaving that morning. He frowned and turned it off. Probably just forgot. Simple. But then, he saw the mug. On the coffee table sat a mug of coffee, still warm. The steam curled lazily into the air. Daniel didn't drink coffee. Not anymore. He had quit 2 months ago after a minor health scare. His doctor told him to cut back on caffeine. So, where had this come from? The next morning, Daniel checked his phone alarm, set for 6:45 a.m. as always, except it had already gone off. He woke at 5:30 to the sound of the shower running. But he lived alone. Daniel approached the bathroom door with careful steps. The water thundered behind the curtain. Steam hissed into the hallway. He pushed the door open. Nothing. No one. Just a freshly soaked towel hanging on the rack. He backed away slowly. It had to be his imagination, or maybe a glitch in the plumbing. But deep down, something twisted. Something real. That Friday, Daniel left work early. He couldn't focus. Numbers blurred. Code stuttered. Anxiety burned behind his eyes. He walked a different route home and passed a small cafe 2 blocks from his apartment. He never went in there. He didn't like the smell of roasted beans anymore. But something in the window made him stop. It was him, sitting by the window, laughing, drinking coffee. Daniel stared. The man was identical to him. Same face, same posture. But the clothes, too loose. Hair, slightly messier. Movements, more relaxed, almost cocky. Daniel stepped forward, but the man in the cafe turned his head slightly and smirked, as if he knew Daniel was watching. Then he raised the cup in a mocking toast. Daniel ran. Daniel told the police. They looked at him with polite boredom. "No crime here, sir," he told his co-workers. They laughed, said he was working too much. He called his sister, Rebecca. "You're just stressed, Danny," she said over the phone. "Take a vacation. Get some air." But Daniel knew what he saw. He returned to the cafe the next day. The same seat was empty. No trace of the other him. But when he got home, his door was unlocked. Inside, His bookshelf had been rearranged. Alphabetically. Daniel never arranged anything alphabetically. And on his bed, neatly folded, were clothes he didn't own. In desperation, Daniel installed a small hidden camera in his apartment. Just above the living room lamp, facing the front door and couch, he waited 3 days. On the 4th night, he reviewed the footage. At exactly 2:42 a.m., the screen flickered. And then, the door opened. Someone walked in. It was him. Same face. Same walk. Wearing Daniel's clothes. The other Daniel walked to the fridge, pulled out orange juice, drank straight from the bottle, then sat on the couch, scrolling through Daniel's laptop. For 40 minutes, before calmly walking out the door, Daniel dropped the phone. That night, Daniel waited in the dark with a baseball bat. At 2:40 a.m., he heard the doorknob rattle. He held his breath. The door creaked open. The other Daniel entered quietly, as if it was his home. Daniel stepped into the hallway, raised the bat. But the other Daniel turned slowly and smiled. "Finally awake," he said. Daniel froze. "What are you?" he whispered. The other Daniel tilted his head. "I'm you. The better version." He stepped forward. "You've wasted this life. I'm just here to correct the path." Daniel swung. The bat connected. The other. Daniel stumbled back, but didn't fall. Instead, he laughed. "You don't get it," he said. "You made me." Daniel ran. Out the door. Down 6 flights of stairs. Into the street. But no one believed him. He screamed for help. The police came. Took him for observation. He was held in a hospital ward for 3 days. When he returned home, everything had changed. His apartment was cleaner. Furniture had been rearranged. Photos on the wall now showed him smiling at events he didn't remember. A job promotion letter sat on the desk, signed with his name. Rebecca visited him that weekend. "I'm fine," Daniel said, smiling over tea. But something was off. He laughed too easily. Cooked dishes he never used to like. And he didn't remember their father's middle name. Rebecca's heart sank, because that wasn't her brother. She checked his fridge when he left to shower. Inside was a photo she recognized, torn in half. Her and Daniel as kids. Except his face was scribbled out. She left quietly. Didn't say goodbye. 3 weeks passed. In a basement 5 blocks away, behind a boarded-up door, the real Daniel sat tied to a chair. Mouth gagged. Face bruised. The other Daniel visited nightly. "I'm doing you a favor," he'd say. "People love me. I fixed your life. You were just wasting it." He placed a mirror in front of Daniel. "Look how tired you look. Look how broken. You're not strong enough to be me." Daniel screamed into the gag. But no one heard. No one looked for him, because he hadn't just been replaced. He'd been erased. The real Daniel eventually escaped. Bruised, weak, starved, but determined. He returned home at 3:00 a.m. The other Daniel was sleeping in his bed. He hovered with a knife, hand trembling. But the other Daniel opened his eyes. "I wondered when you'd try," he whispered. They fought. Quiet, desperate. Only one walked out. Now, Daniel lives alone again. Same apartment, same job. But he's happier now. Smiles more. More confident. Sometimes, when he walks past mirrors, his reflection lingers half a second longer than it should. Sometimes, he forgets memories that used to be vivid. Sometimes he calls Rebecca and pauses before speaking. And sometimes, late at night, he stands in front of the mirror and whispers, "Which one am I again?" In the dead stillness of night, when the world drowns in silence, there are sounds meant for no one. Some frequencies travel not across space, but time, and some signals should never be heard. Elliot Crane was a quiet man, a former Marine radio technician turned reclusive hobbyist. He lived alone on the edge of Graybridge, a fading town tucked between dense woods and a forgotten coastline. Since his daughter Emily's death 3 years ago in a car accident, Elliot had retreated into his world of static and signal. His home was cluttered with aging receivers, oscilloscopes, antennae coils, and soldering tools. But what consumed him most was a low-frequency radio project he'd started 6 months ago. An experimental long-range receiver designed to pick up sub-audible signals below 3 Hz. Elliot believed that Earth's natural frequencies might carry more than just noise. He wanted to find patterns, maybe even something intelligent. One night at exactly 2:17 a.m., his receiver hissed and chirped unexpectedly. He nearly spilled his coffee. The meters flickered. Something was transmitting. Through the headphones came a whisper, barely audible. A female voice, young, familiar. Dad. He froze. No music, no numbers. Just a single word. Dad. Elliot tore off the headset and stared at it like it had bitten him. It had to be a glitch, or interference, or his mind playing cruel games. He hadn't slept well in weeks. But the next night, the signal returned. Only this time, it said more. Don't forget me, Dad. Elliot obsessively recorded every session from then on. He altered the gain, added filters, even rebuilt parts of the receiver. Each night, at the exact same time, 2:17 a.m., the voice would appear again. Always faint, always distorted, but clearer with each passing day. It was Emily's voice. He was sure of it. At first, the messages were soft memories, fragments of bedtime stories, her asking for her favorite cereal, a lullaby they used to sing. Elliot wept the first time she said, "I miss you too." He stopped leaving the house, stopped answering calls. The groceries rotted in the fridge. He shaved less, slept during the day, and waited at night. When a neighbor, Mrs. Kaufman, knocked to check in, Elliot didn't answer. He sat in the dark, headphones on, waiting for the signal. That night, something new came through. "I'm not alone," the voice said. "They're here too." Static rose violently, followed by strange layered whispers. Dozens of them. A chorus of broken signals, crying, laughing, shrieking, before cutting off completely. Disturbed but convinced he was uncovering something profound, Elliot doubled down. He constructed a larger antenna in his backyard, raising a spiderweb of wires toward the sky. He modified his receiver to sweep a broader range, between natural Earth resonance and man-made VLF bands. But the more he listened, the more the line between grief and reality blurred. Emily's voice no longer sounded like an echo. She answered his questions, reacted to his thoughts. She told him secrets only they shared. Sometimes she begged him not to stop listening. "I need you, Dad. Please, don't leave me again." One night she said something that chilled him to the bone. "Come find me. I'm waiting in the silence." Then the signal stopped. For 4 nights in a row, silence. Not even background static. It was unnatural, like the receiver had gone deaf. Then, on the 5th night, the signal returned with something new. Coordinates. 47 degree, 16. 122 to 20, 45 fathom. The location was a remote patch of woods on the outskirts of Greybridge, not far from where Emily's accident had happened. Elliot, shaking with a cocktail of fear and desperation, packed up his field gear, receiver, batteries, and a handheld recorder. He hiked into the dense forest just before midnight. The trees were eerily still, no wind, no crickets, just the buzz of distant transmission towers and the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. At exactly 2:17 a.m., he powered up the receiver. The static burst to life, louder than ever. Then came Emily's voice, clear and sorrowful. "You're close." He turned in circles, raising the handheld antenna, following the signal like a divining rod. The voice guided him through the brush, deeper into the trees until he found a clearing. And in the center of the clearing, covered in moss and earth, was something metal, a wrecked car. Elliot's breath caught. It was Emily's car, the one she'd died in, but the report had said it was destroyed and taken by authorities. He stared in disbelief. His radio hissed violently. "Help me," the voice cried. "They won't let me go." He dropped to his knees and began digging. But the ground wasn't just dirt. It was like ash, cold and bone dry. His fingers bled. Then, just beneath the soil, he saw something that made his heart stop. A second radio, identical to his own prototype, buried and still powered. He pulled it out, hands trembling. The old unit was corroded but intact. A wire led into the earth beneath the car. When he plugged his headphones into it, the voice screamed, "Run!" But Elliot didn't move. He whispered, "Emily, I'm here." And then he heard another voice, a man's voice, sharp, mocking. "She's not here, Elliot." The static twisted into grotesque harmonics, and the whispers returned, hundreds of voices layered, speaking backwards, murmuring numbers, crying in languages he didn't understand. "You called us," the voice said, and we answered. His receiver sparked, smoking violently. The radio frequencies had become a beacon, not to his daughter, but to something else, something that had learned how to sound like her. "You didn't speak to the dead," the voice laughed. "You taught the silence how to lie." A figure emerged from the tree line. It looked like Emily. Same voice, same smile. But the eyes were wrong, hollow, empty as radio static. Elliot backed away slowly, but she followed. "You said you'd never leave me, Dad." Then she opened her mouth, and from within, dozens of voices screamed. They found Elliot days later, wandering along the highway. Clothes torn, eyes wide, mute. He never spoke again. Not to the doctors, not to the police, not even when they asked how he'd survived with severe internal injuries and scorched fingertips. The radio equipment in his house was dismantled and taken for analysis. All the recordings were blank, except one. A single file, corrupted and distorted, except for one clear sentence. "I miss you, Dad." That voice didn't match Emily's. It matched Elliot's, a voice he never remembered recording. Sometimes the worst echoes don't come from the past, they come from within. And sometimes, silence is not empty, it's listening.